GyrlSense. My name is Maria del Carmen, your host. Today's special guest is Janet Davenport. Janet has more than 30 years of professional communication experience. She has worked in the media, philanthropic, healthcare, and higher education industries. Janet has worn an editorial page editor, writer, and news reporter hat. She has a graduate certificate in spirituality from Hartford Seminar and a certificate from the Women's Leadership Institute at the seminar. Today, Janet is a visionary, soul-driven entrepreneur, a professional certified coach wearing a title of Executive Communication Coach.
So Janet, thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome to the GyrlSense family.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you for having me. Appreciate
Wonderful.
it.
Now, you have been a very busy woman, I must say. But you're also, which I didn't mention before, you're also an alum of the University of Wisconsin.
Right.
Was Wisconsin home, or did you go away for school?
No, Wisconsin was not home, and I went away to school there. I started my undergraduate education in Boston, and I moved to Wisconsin and finished my undergraduate education there.
Where did you, so that was graduate school in Boston, so where did
No,
you?
I started undergraduate in Boston.
Started undergraduate in Boston.
And then I transferred
Got it.
when I moved to Wisconsin, and I finished up my undergraduate work in Wisconsin.
So is Boston home?
No, I guess I should tell you where I'm from. I like to say I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. That's what I consider my hometown.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about my background real quick. I was what they call an Army brat. I'm actually legitimately from Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I was born, and my dad was in the military, so we traveled quite a bit, and we lived in the Midwest, lived abroad, started my public school education in Germany, lived in New Jersey, New York. I mean, we traveled extensively, and then my dad retired and we settled in Springfield, which is where I finished up what they called junior high school back then, and high school. And then from high school, I went to Boston and started school there. I went to Boston University. And then for reasons of love, moved out to Wisconsin and went ahead and finished school there. And I got an undergraduate degree in social work.
Yes, which brings me to that topic.
Yes.
You did get your undergraduate degree in social work. However, did you ever practice social work?
Actually, I did.
Oh, okay.
I did for a hot minute. Sometimes I feel like I've reached that stage in my life and in my career where I feel like I've had many lives.
Sure.
And in a past life, I was a social worker. I worked in human services briefly in Wisconsin. I was actually licensed there to do social work. And when I came back to Massachusetts in the 80s, I was a social worker for the state of Massachusetts for about maybe a year and a half.
Okay, so, but in many, as I listed earlier, many of those professions were, I'm going to say, specifically geared more towards the communication industry. So how did you sway away from social work to communications?
Well, interestingly enough, I feel like, and that's an excellent question, because I feel like I've had many lives, and I used to call myself a Jane of all trades. I've had many interests, and communication just kind of came naturally to me. I did take classes in creative writing, advanced, what do they call it, advanced writing, and I did take some journalism classes, but I didn't really think about becoming a writer, which is actually how I got into communications. It was my love of writing and storytelling and being a voice and giving voice and building narrative. And I've just always had a passion for stories and people and what make people tick and people's circumstances, and I just love to write. So it never, silly me, it never occurred to me that that would be a way to make a living. I just knew I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a difference in the world. I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And I didn't really, it was evolutionary for me to find out that you can do that through writing. Social work was the vehicle that I had chose as a profession to do the work that I wanted to do with other people, to do self-empowerment, self-determination, and working with people who were trying to make a difference in the world. And I saw myself as a change agent in that way. Excuse me, but what I found was I just loved writing, and I wrote all the time.
So did you write for other individuals, or how did your writing become a job?
Isn't that
eventually?
That's a great question too. It's very interesting. So as a kid, I actually used to draw. I used to draw stories.
Okay.
And I'd write stories. I used to write all the time, and you know, my writing would always come to the attention of my English teachers, and I also I wrote poetry.
Okay.
And then in my 20s, when I was in college, I enjoyed the literature and the writing classes. I was just taking them for fun as electives. And one day, and this is a true story, I'll just tell you, we have time for a quick story.
Sure.
Before I went out to Wisconsin, I just got this idea that, you know, I wanted to write for a publication. And I was staying in Springfield. I was, it was somewhat of a sabbatical. I was in transition, moving from Boston to Wisconsin. I started school, but wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I wanted to write. So I went downtown to my hometown paper. Now, imagine this happening today. This would never happen today with security and everything, but this was the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
I just walked off the street in a pair of jeans. I'll never forget, a little sweatshirt. And I walked right in and said, I want to speak to the editor of the paper. So she told me to go on upstairs, and I had a seat, and I met with Mr. Garvey, who at that time was the executive editor, which was like the next person under the publisher.
Sure.
And we had a lovely conversation. He took such an interest in my writing, and I worked as a stringer for the paper for several months, and I trained. It was like an on-the-job learning. They took a chance on me, and I like to think they thought I had a gift, natural talent, and I built a portfolio working at the Springfield paper.
That is very hard to come by these days.
Oh, it was a blessing. I would
It was
have
really,
to say.
I must say as well. I won't say that it never happens. Sometimes, you know, if you're in the right, I still believe if you're in the right place at the right time, you know, things may happen for you. But to walk off of the street, not being prepared, you know, these days you have to be so polished before you're walking in when you're thinking of a position and so forth.
Isn't that the thing? But I look back on that young woman who did that, and I say, Janet, that took a lot of moxie.
Exactly.
It took a lot of moxie, and I think the lesson in that too is the power of enthusiasm, curiosity, and interest. Because the conversation that I had with Mr. Garvey impressed him, and after he gave me that chance, which was the equivalent really of an internship.
Right, exactly.
I stayed in communication with him. I thanked him. And then, you know, just to wrap it up, I went to Wisconsin. I majored in social work. I did social work for a little while when I got back to Springfield. But I had this calling, this yearning, this longing to write, to report, to tell stories. And I called the Springfield newspaper, and the gentleman who had trained me at the time was the city editor when I worked with him. And now what we're doing is we're fast forwarding. This is like 7 years later.
Okay.
And I asked to speak to him because I wanted to do some freelance. I just wanted to write some magazine articles or something. And I was informed he was the managing editor. He had moved up in the food chain. So another, serendipity, call it luck, serendipity, call it a blessing. Right. I really felt I was meeting my destiny.
Absolutely.
And he said, there's actually a full-time position open. Why don't you go for that?
Wow.
And I went to the paper, and they gave a test, and I, of course, passed the test, and I was offered a position as a general assignment reporter. And I'm going to tell you, I felt like it was a dream come true for me.
Right, like if you were walking on air, I can just
Yeah,
imagine.
because I was doing what I felt I was I was doing what I was born to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 20 years.
Wow.
About 11 or so at the Springfield newspaper.
Okay.
Started out as a general assignment reporter. I was a food reviewer. I was a feature writer.
Okay.
I became an editorial page editor. I did layout. I was a letters editor. And then from there I went to the Hartford Courant and served on their editorial board for about 7 to 8 years. So
That is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable.
So that was my journey.
Yeah.
And it was I look back on it, it was really interesting. I still say I should write about those experiences.
You should.
and those
Why
adventures.
not?
Yes.
There's definitely
Yes.
a population that would be very interested in that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me as well, in speaking with my my own kids, or any individual who's in school,
Yes.
who doesn't necessarily know what they want to be when they grow up, and sometimes even adults, right? Sometimes
Right.
adults still don't know what they want to be. And, I'll even say it, I'll even, put my son on Jordan, sorry. But, sometimes you go to school and you don't know what it is, or you don't know what it's called that you want. You know what you like, but you don't know what it's called. And so
That's a great way of putting it.
you know what you like, but you just don't know what it's called. And unfortunately, you're in school, and you begin to switch your majors. Oh, maybe it's that. Nope. Oh, maybe
I
it's
did that.
Oh,
I did
nope,
that.
maybe it's that.
Yeah, I did that. I did that.
But I think, the lesson or the takeaway, I would say, is, how many individuals in their current position who are actually practicing what they graduated with. It doesn't come by often. You meet all these,
You're absolutely
VPs
right.
who probably majored in history, and all of a sudden they're doing something opposite. So, it's to keep that open mind.
I think that's a great
right?
point.
So keep that open mind that you're not really tied to whatever it is that what's on that piece of paper at the end of the 4-year career.
In
right?
fact, and there's good data and good information on this. We're living in a rapidly changing, and it sounds cliche, but we are really living in a rapidly changing world and economy. And the chances of, by the time a young person graduates, gets their undergraduate degree, I forget the exact statistic, but at least half of what they've learned has already become obsolete because of technology and knowledge is changing, and
Correct.
and the work world is changing so much. It's no longer this upward hierarchical career ladder. It's more like a spiral.
It is.
And what employers like Google and Microsoft and other companies, innovative companies, are looking for, corporations looking for today, are what they call agile learners, or
Yes.
people who are lifelong learners.
Yes.
That is that, you may be hired for one thing, but 2 or 3 years later, that job has become obsolete.
Correct.
Half of the jobs that exist today are not going, by the year 2020, are not going to exist.
Exactly.
And not only that, the jobs of the future, there are jobs, you have to be prepared for jobs that have not yet been created.
Correct.
So, when you begin to wrap your mind around that, I almost feel like the type of student and learner that I was, and the type of professional I've been, I really feel like I've come of age. I feel like, because at the time, there were times I felt a little odd or a little like a misfit. I kind of envied those. There were people in high school, I know what I want to do.
Sure.
and they would get in a major, and that's what they did for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
I went to college, and I started out in nursing, if you can believe that. And I just found out, I was like, wow, I can do this. Because, you know, I love, there's so many things I love. I have so many interests, and I found out that that's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
That's a strength.
And that's exactly where I was going to, you know, step in for a second. I think it's a marvelous thing. And even for myself, I would also think like, well, how can they be so certain that they want to be a doctor or a nurse and I don't know what I want to be because I want to be a lot of things.
Yeah.
So what do I, you know, concentrate on? And what I've learned over, you know, as I've become, you know, older, is that who's stopping me?
Right.
Who's stopping me?
It's
Why
a
can't
mindset.
I
Yep, it's a mindset.
do the things that I want to do?
Yeah, it's a mindset for
you
sure.
know, there may be different degrees of it, but you can still dabble into whatever passions that you may have. And speaking of that, so in addition to have worn all these different hats that I've listed at the top of the show, you've also provided strategic guidance and supported services for CEOs and leaders and diverse occupations and others in many walks of life. So yet again, we're pulling out another hat, another talent, another skill, another profession.
Yeah.
Gee, that sounds like my mission.
Yes.
What types of service did you provide for these corporations at the time?
Okay, so I've mostly worked in the nonprofit, but as working in a senior management capacity, because I've been a marketing officer, chief marketing officer. I've been a vice president. I've been a senior manager. I've been a director, and in wearing those hats, it's been my job to provide counsel, direction, vision, and in my sphere, because technical support to leaders, to other executives. So it's been, you know, providing strategic guidance, insights, knowledge and expertise to CEOs, because I've also had the experience of being on loan. Because one of my I've learned to be. I didn't know I was a strategic communications planner. I was like, oh, there's a name for this.
There's a name for that. See,
and not everyone, not all journalists, not all writers, which is, you know, because that's always my passion. That's how I got into this business. But it's a way of looking at the world and a way of thinking about relationships and how what I call the dots are all connected.
Sure.
And I'm a big picture person. And so I can see the big picture. And so I can help. I've helped other senior leaders, CEOs, vice presidents. I'm trying to think of some of the titles that they've worn. President and CEO, executive directors, managers. And in some of the clients I have right now, I mean, they carry titles such as, you know, president, CEO, executive directors, that people are looking for strategic guidance, because sometimes what happens is, and I went through this too, when you're, what do they say, sometimes you're so entrenched in your work, you can't see the forest for the trees. So sometimes you need someone to kind of help
from
you.
the outside in.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So did I hear correctly? Are you currently still active in providing these services for these individuals now?
In a different capacity. I've provided those services as an employee in those positions. And now, I started Davenport Coaching Solutions, which is a leadership executive coaching practice. I am a professional certified coach, and I do provide coaching. And what I'm also able to provide is the strategic communications piece to that too.
So if there is a corporation out there that a viewer that's watching and says, ooh, can I contract Janet Davenport
absolutely.
to come in to my department or my corporation and do either provide services in professional development or process improvement. Is that something that you're still actively open to do on a consultant basis?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, in fact, I do. I'm working with a couple of organizations right now. One of which I just completed doing a strategic plan.
Okay.
So I do strategic planning.
Okay.
Again, my expertise is in marketing, working with the media.
Okay.
But what I'm also finding is in the executive coaching practice, people come and the presenting problem is, I'm stuck. I'm ready to go to the next level. Or another common issue is overwhelmed. In today's world, I'm so overwhelmed with all the responsibilities and the tasks at hand. And what we'll inevitably find is that a lot of the solutions are communications.
Correct.
Whether it's how that person is communicating as a leader and as a manager, and also in providing, there are communication strategies for better communications internally and externally in the areas of marketing, media relations, and of course today in the digital world, getting your brand out.
Absolutely. So you not only are active as a consultant for corporations if they wanted to reach out to you, but you could also, or any of viewers that could also benefit from your services as an individual.
Absolutely.
Would be those who, as you just mentioned, are looking for a new career path. And actually, as I think about it, another group of population that I can see would definitely benefit, of course, I knew I could have benefited, graduate students who are preparing for their thesis, or PhD students, or capstones, or whatever they're calling it these days, to situate themselves in whatever it is that they're seeking, or trying to plan for that final piece. So then, yet that's another population that could also reach out to you. So you have the corporation world, you have an individual who wants to start fresh, self-improvement, and then it's also, student-wise as far as,
Yes,
graduate or
absolutely.
PhD.
Graduate students. In fact,
PhD.
absolutely.
And so there is, very quickly, there's actually yet another passion that you have. Another success that you've done, and that is the study of spirituality. So I know that you were a graduate from, or you have a certificate from the Hartford Seminary, and was that, or how did that passion rooted? Was it a long time? Was it recently? And what do you plan on doing with it?
Well, that's an interesting question. That's a great question. I think the way I want to answer that is saying that it's deep rooted. It's long term. It's long term.
Yeah.
It goes. When I say long term, it goes back.
Okay.
It's the driver. That's why I look at myself as a soul driven entrepreneur.
Yes.
My we call it spiritual life, and now there's neuroscience to support that.
Got it.
Positive thinking,
Yes.
our mindset, the way we see ourselves in the world, and if we see ourselves as part of something larger, which I do, I see myself as part of something larger.
Correct.
That without getting too,
Yeah. So it's keeping the
mystical
faith,
about it,
right?
but the simple way of, I think the best way of putting it is it's faith, and in the most inclusive sense of the word, because, and that's one of the reasons I went to Hartford Seminary, and I have a graduate certificate in spirituality, and I studied transformational leadership and care of the soul. That's basically. And isn't that a wonderful thing to be able to bring to a coaching practice?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Janet, it's been a pleasure having you.
The pleasure is mine. It just goes so fast. This has been great.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so I can almost guarantee, or I can guarantee that I will be a client of yours for long term, because we're always trying to improve ourselves, right? There's no limit in trying to improve. We are
always growing.
lifelong students.
That's right. I believe that.
And we are definitely lifelong students. So as long as I'm a student and you're an executive coach, I will have you lead me.
It would be a pleasure.
Thank you
I would
so
love to.
much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Maria del Carmen, your host. Without you, this show would not be possible. Visit GyrlSense.com for more information about our guests. And of course, join us again for more GyrlSense.